He came to my attention when I was in San Francisco on this one occasion, and I saw that he was holding what he calls a ministry in a large auditorium. One of my magician colleagues, a young fellow named Randi, was with me at the time, and we decided we'd go and take a look at what Reverend Popoff was doing to his audience. And wisely, we went a good hour before the service was to start. As it was, it started half an hour after that, because people were still coming in. But we got there a good hour before the announced time of the service. I hate to use these words, it's insulting to anyone who has genuine religious beliefs. I don't have any, incidentally, but that's neither here nor there. And we found that Mrs. Popoff was walking around the audience, and she was going to people sitting in various areas, about as dispersed as the folks are here tonight. And she'd approach them and say, I'm Elizabeth Popoff, and my husband, the Reverend Popoff, is going to be out here shortly, and he's going to be talking to you. Are you here to be healed? And in most cases, they were. And they would say, yes, I'm here to be healed. What is your name? I'll fill it out on this pad. You can take the pad from me. Here's the pen. Fill it out there so that we will have a record of your attending here, and you will also get on our free mailing list. And we will be able to send you, in the U.S. Post, copies of our magazines that we send out every now and then. They're absolutely free, no obligation, of course. And then people would fill them out, and they'd give their phone numbers and all the information that was on the form. And she'd talk to them for a little while, and maybe mumble a few prayers, and then she'd walk on to the next person. And she covered pretty well a good third of the audience that way. Now these were auditoriums, massive auditoriums. Places were just packed to the walls with people standing along the walls and up in the balconies. It was just everywhere. Massive audiences, because they weren't charged to come in. It was absolutely free, and a lot of advertising had gone out, very expensive advertising on radio and television, and in posters everywhere. So he attracted a huge audience. And then my young friend at the time, Andrew Harder, he went and he had a few credentials around his neck that if anyone read, it was a local library card on a ribbon and a few things like that. It didn't mean a thing, but he looked as if he was semi-official, so he had the run of the place. And he came back to me at one point there, and he said, now what do we do? I said, well, we'll just, I want you to look like you're a reporter, so we get a pad of paper and go around making notes, and when Popoff gets out here, follow him around. He did exactly that, and Popoff made his grand entrance with the music and the whole thing. He marched down the aisles yelling hallelujah at the top of his lungs, and that was all very acceptable to the audience. And Andrew came back to me on the back of the stage where I was concealed, and he said, guess what? I said, yes. He's wearing a hearing aid in his left ear. Now that may not be very significant to you, but this is a man who heals the deaf. And he himself was wearing a hearing aid. Now, it was a very clever kind. It's a business that plugs in directly into your ear canal, no wire connecting it. It works by induction from a coil that you have around your neck. I had seen them in operation before. They use them on the soap operas very often on TV to cue the actors, and they've got somebody there guiding them in their lines and reminding them where they move and what they're supposed to say. Absolutely invisible because they're right inside the ear canal. But Andrew was astute enough to get around to the side of him, and he saw this little thing plugged into his ear. So I said, I think I know our attack now. He's receiving a radio message from someplace. I wondered where that could be. So we went back the second night, and when we went back, we had a technician, a volunteer technician, Alec Jason, who is a private investigator. Alec was dressed, I can't begin to describe to you, he was dressed in sort of coveralls. He had every massive electronic stuff around his neck you could imagine. Most of it didn't operate at all. It had nothing to do with why he was there. He had so much identification around his neck that the guards and security people would come up and say, oh, go. They didn't want to read all that stuff. That's how he got away with it. And he was going around, he was plugging things into the 110 volt outlets, and he had headphones on. And he was trucking on down there. He wasn't listening to music. He was listening to all the transmissions from the cash registers. They actually do transmit a radio signal when they ring up the cash registers in the office upstairs. And every taxi cab going by, he had a field strength meter and a little search mechanism there, and he recorded every frequency that was being used until he came to one where he heard Mrs. Popoff talking to her husband. Now we have a recording that we subsequently made, and we went to many of these meetings. I was always in disguise. I wore a brown-red wig and dyed my beard brown-red, and I wore dark brown contact lenses. And it was quite a frightening sight, I must say, but I got away with it. And people avoided me. They look at me and, oh, he's weird. They just walk away from me, and that's exactly what I wanted. So we got to observe Peter Popoff very, very well. We knew exactly what his system was, and we had tracked the frequency, of course, and we recorded it. The one night that we walked in there, as the meeting was about to commence, he walked out there yelling hallelujah, and we heard Mrs. Popoff's voice and recorded it. Hello, Petey, can you hear me? If you can't, you're in deep shit. Because she was the one transferring the information to him. Go down the left aisle, fellow in the red shirt on the end there, his name is Canon, and he lives in, she gave the town and whatnot, and she described the man's ailments, and Popoff went over and said, God tells me that you're suffering from whatever. And the fellow in the chair was astonished at this. Now, he had discussed this with Mrs. Popoff previously, but that was a good hour before, and he didn't know, Peter Popoff knew exactly where he was, what he looked like, what his name was, etc. That's the way the racket was done. Now, we got videotape of this, and we got the recordings, of course. I, in my show business career, have done 22 Johnny Carson shows. I'm afraid I run into audiences now of people who don't know who Johnny Carson was. And believe me, that's what they call the age gap. I have to explain to them who Johnny Carson was. He was about this level. I trust that most of you will know who Johnny Carson was. And I went into the NBC offices in Los Angeles. That was in a day when you could actually walk into the office and not have to sign away your life and take your shoes off and a few other things. I went to Fred DeCordova's office, the producer of the Johnny Carson show, and he greeted me. I walked in and I played some of the video for him, and he sat there with his mouth open. He said, oh, we're going to use this tonight. He turned to his secretary and he said, the two starlets from Warner Brothers, I'll book them to another night because we've got something really hot here. So she walked out of the office and apparently bumped some starlets. I don't want to know what the process consists of. but they were canceled for that night. Then he reached for the phone. I reached out and I said, "Fred, don't call Johnny." He said, "Oh, Johnny doesn't like surprises." I said, "But think of the expression on his face." He thought for a minute. He looked at me, pointed right between my eyes and said, "Okay, but it's on you." Well, I got very lucky that night. It worked very, very well. What happened was I appeared in the show and John hadn't been alerted as to what the gimmick was that Popoff was using, you see. And the program went on. We played the program, Popoff's program, as it was broadcast on TV, the way people at home would see it. And he's walking down the aisle, and this awful voice, but it was an evangelist voice, I guess, I don't know. And he identified the name of the person, what their address was, and the whole business. Wow. And then the tape stopped, and Johnny said, "Now, how was he doing all this?" And I said, "Well, we sent Alec Jason." I gave him the story that I just told you. He said, "Let's see that tape again. This time we'll have Mrs. Popoff's voice in the background." So John looked up at the monitor, lights went down, and the cut of tape came up, in which you hear Mrs. Popoff saying, "They live at 2487 Foothill Drive." And as soon as she said that, as soon as Johnny heard her voice saying that, now you must remember in the studio there were 3 different sound inputs. Mine, from my microphone, that was pointed at me, Johnny's, that was pointed at him, and the audience microphone in general. The program was always taped in the afternoon at 5.